Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's last episode of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening...
What happened today was an injustice. It was unlawful. We're just waiting for the courts to redeem the residents of Johannesburg from what has happened here today.
The DA's Mpho Phalatse is out, and the ANC's Dada Morero is in. The new Joburg mayor is my guest. Thereafter, Action SA's Bongani Baloyi comes on to talk about how the DA gave the ANC the city on a platter.
Those that might have turned us down today, or those who are potentially willing to assist, is the country needs you right now.
Acting Public Protector Kholeka Gcaleka explains why she couldn't exonerate National Assembly Speaker and former Defense Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngqakula, but cleared President Ramaphosa and Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan. And with the monkey off his back, Gordhan this afternoon then went on to announce a new board for embattled Eskom. That's what's coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. The ANC is back in power in the city of Johannesburg. This after their Joburg chairperson was today elected mayor unopposed. Dada Morero's predecessor, Mpho Phalatse, was ousted after the council passed a motion of no confidence. Earlier, her last-ditch court application to challenge the validity of the council meeting was struck off the roll.
A City of Johannesburg council sitting that almost descended into chaos. Members of the Democratic Alliance heckled minority parties, which had brought a motion of no confidence in the mayor. They refused to sign the register and unsuccessfully requested an adjournment for purposes of a caucus. The no confidence motion, however, was successful with 139 votes in the 270-seat council.
They came, they said that they do not recognize the meeting. You must also remember that these people is government. They can't, it's like government protesting itself, which is wrong, and it's at the detrimental of the residents of the city of Johannesburg. This is why we didn't have faith in them, we didn't have confidence in them.
Ex-Mayor Mpho Phalatse believes her removal was unlawful and an injustice. This after an urgent bid by her office to declare the sitting invalid was struck off the roll.
What happened today was an injustice. It was unlawful. We're just waiting for the courts to redeem the residents of Johannesburg from what has happened here today. We believe in our judicial system.
New incumbent Dada Morero says the immediate task of the incoming administration is to stabilize the city's finances.
It is heartbreaking that the city's main entities are financially on their knees with unsustainable overdrafts, such as the City Power, which is now sitting at 8 billion negative cash balance. How do we fix a city that has financially collapsed? 10 months of golden promise have taken us 100 years back.
He says they want to immediately review and improve the balance sheet of the ailing municipality and, when needed, collaborate with financial institutions to reduce the city's debt to a sustainable level. Morero says they will tap into alternative sources of energy to counter rolling blackouts in the city. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The Mayor of Johannesburg joins us on the line. Good evening, sir. Your Worship, congratulations are in order.
Good morning, good evening, Vuyo. Good evening.
Well, how did you pull it off? Maybe let's start there. What did you do this time around?
No, well, we We would have been approached on probably about 2 months, 3 months ago by smaller parties to say they've got issues to raise, and only to find we were also ready to raise issues at that time, which relates to how the DA has been governing the city, what were the gaps, what were the failures. And we then started the discussion, and that discussion led to us preparing to present a motion of no confidence in the Speaker and the Mayor of the City of Johannesburg.
Well, if my information is correct, it had very little, if anything, to do with the DA's service delivery record, but rather how the DA has managed its coalition arrangement with these smaller parties. So you sort of became, the lucky beneficiary more than anything else.
Well, it's in twofold. One, it's the disgruntlement of the coalition partners, and two, their inability to advance service delivery in the City of Johannesburg. If you go to all the townships, whether Ivory Park, Orange Farm or Soweto, you'd see that the majority of robots are not functioning, and there's no intention to even attempt to fix those robots and make them work. You would have seen that there's more potholes in the townships than in the suburbs, and no intention to try and attend to those. And you do know that during the rainy season, you will see a lot of potholes, obviously from the period November to right up to April, which is your rainy season, and they've not been responding quite adequately to those challenges of potholes. And those issues are the issues that we have been raising with the DA, including the fact that instead of them focusing on stabilizing the finances of the city, they're focusing on something else, which it was not going to help the city in any way. In fact, we lost our rating as the city because of their attitude. Our collection rate dropped to under 85%, which suggests that we're in trouble in funding the budget. We are currently about 2.5 billion under, meaning that we'll not be able to meet the budget, meaning that we need to revise it down. And once we do that, it means there are projects that are service delivery related, which will be affected. And over and above these issues, the city does not have the ability to even raise money or borrow money in the capital market, precisely because the banks and other institutions do not have confidence in the way that the city has been managed financially. So those are some of the things that we think are creating problems in the City of Johannesburg. For example, they're now sitting at about 6.8 billion overdraft, just City Power alone, which suggests that the boards that they put in place are not doing their job, they're sleeping on the job. So we have to deal with those boards because they're unable to really function and help the city to grow. How do we explain and justify a growing overdraft of that nature? It means that basically City Power is insolvent. Basically, it can't really function. So those are some of the issues, Vuyo, that we are raising quite critical. By the way, Vuyo, they did the same thing when they took over in 2016. And I think we must always underline that by the time we left the city in 2016, we had left it with at least a cash balance. Just City Power was sitting at about 2.5 to 3.5 billion. The city in general was sitting at about 4.5 billion cash balance that would have been left when we went out of office. When we came back in 2019, all that was reversed. In fact, when we came back, it was overdrafts left, right, and center. Because they enjoy spending money that they do not have. So those are the issues that we are raising. And by the way, the meeting of today was lawful. It was organized within the framework of the law. So there's nothing that the Speaker would have done wrong.
In fact, on the back of what you just said, something that caught my attention. During your speech, and that we played, the clip is part of the package we played earlier. You're saying in 10 months, the DA has taken Johannesburg 100 years back. Isn't that, an exaggeration?
Well, it can be an exaggeration, but in essence, it feels that we've been taken back 100 years. There are no brilliant ideas. There's no innovation that is coming. When we were in charge till 2016, you could see that there was a lot of innovation ideas that were coming, that we're implementing. You can talk about the BRT that was done by the ANC government, what was intended to contribute towards providing quality public transport, which is efficient and that moves fast so that our people could reach their workplaces, schools, and all other places on time. There were a lot of things that we were doing, including dealing with reducing the impact of load shedding. When ESCOM would say they would want to do load reduction at level 2, the city will be able to absorb level 2 and there will be not load shedding in Johannesburg. Only at the point where they would request level 4 that will have difficulties. And at that time, we were also able to sell part of the excess electricity we had to ESCOM. Now, there's a number of ideas, including us bringing new cars, your electric cars, which probably people are now excited about. But by 2016 already, Johannesburg had electric vehicles that we're already using as part of the fleet of the city. Now, I'm saying they've taken us 100 years back because there's no innovation, there's no thinking. All what they are doing, they're managing what is there, and nothing new that they're bringing to the table that's exciting, that's going to respond to challenges of society, whether is it in the job and arena, where we actually had a program that was intended to produce entrepreneurs, but the DA killed all that. So in fact, they are not bringing anything new or anything innovative. They're just doing things and managing what is already there. So that is why it feels as if we've been taken 100 years back.
But you will have to be honest and frank in your appraisal, of the situation. What went wrong, who did what, and what will it take to correct those wrongs? That's if you are to really fix the problems of this city. So to what extent, though, would you accept that previous ANC administrations had a big contribution in the state of affairs, or in the state that the city is in right now?
I think it's a good question, and you just have to go back before 2016 and you'd realize that one of the biggest problems at that time that we were faced with as the ANC administration was what was termed the billing crisis, which was the biggest problem that we had to deal with as the ANC at that time. And we navigated the situation until we were able to reduce it to an extent that queries at that time were sitting at about 5,000 queries, which meant there's progress in resolving the billing crisis. 2, it was the issue of managing the 280 informal settlements that we had, which was a big challenge for the city of Johannesburg. And as a result of that, we declared new developments that had to be built. One was Luferin development in the south of Soweto, and 2 was the Flare Wharf, which is just bordering Meadowlands and Roodepoort. And the intention, of course, of putting Flare Wharf where we had put it between Meadowlands and Roodepoort, the intention, of course, was to stitch the city together and bring closer these townships to the city. So those are the major problems we had, but we responded in that fashion. Now, the problems that the DA then took, we must understand they started from 2016, so don't calculate them only in the 10 months. But go back 2016 and you realize that beyond the 3 years they had, they actually messed up the city. The ANC had only 24 months to try and reverse some of the mess and the damage that the DA had done. And in that 24 months, we realized that there's not much you could do, and that is why we declared the stormwater program and roads resurfacing and pothole, and we brought in what we termed an accelerated service delivery program. So those are the programs that we thought in that 24 months would help us to make a difference in the city of Johannesburg. And indeed, we made a difference in Orange Farm, we made a difference in Ivory Park, and so on and so on. So clearly, Vuyo, you can't say the mess up is only 10 months. It's actually started in 2016, and that's when the city started regressing. Even your finances, for your finances to collapse, they collapsed after a very long time. So it actually started in 2016, and now we're feeling the actual collapse of the finances of the city. And we have to ensure that we stop this thing, stabilize the finances, focus on raising capital, focus on collecting what is owed to the city so that we can be able to move forward and build this wonderful city of ours. So that is our view, and we are convinced that the DA has demonstrated not once, at least twice, to the residents of Johannesburg that they do not have the capacity, and in fact, beyond capacity is the willingness to govern a city as complex as Johannesburg, because they are used to focusing on one constituencies, which is their constituencies in the suburbs. Now going throughout and managing all constituencies becomes very difficult for the Democratic Alliance in Johannesburg. And I think the story of Cape Town is better told by those that are in Cape Town, that the people in Khayelitsha, Langa, and so on and so on, Cape Flats and so on, are not experiencing or they're not having a good experience, a daily experience of the municipality.
Well, but you also can't say that the people of the city have had the best experience ever, and that you committed no wrongs in the 20-odd years that the ANC was in power.
Well, if we talk about wrongs, let's talk about those wrongs and raise them sharply to say these are the wrongs that you did. We're not perfect. There are challenges, there are mistakes that were committed. But I can tell you, Joburg was rated the #1 city in the continent precisely because of the type of work we were doing, the roads that we built, our ability to provide quality services, such as provision of water, refuse removal, and over and above that, we're committed to building a smart city. And in that way, we then brought about at least about 200 or so free Wi-Fi spots throughout the city. If you travel around the townships, you'll see a lot of young people either gathered around the BRT station, which is it's a free a Wi-Fi hotspot with an intention to help young people to access information through the internet, whether it's job opportunities or school opportunities, homeworks, and all sorts of things that young people have access to. Now, if you go out throughout the townships, we have Wi-Fi spots that are helping young people to access. We also had an important online university study in all our libraries, where young people could study through for free with institutions of higher learning in abroad, which was contributing towards helping young people to get their qualifications and degrees for free. And in fact, that program was destabilized by the DA when they took over in 2016 by Mashaba and destroyed that program. So there's a lot that we did right. And the right, I suppose, is more than the wrongs. And we were committed to growing Johannesburg to a better city. And we did everything, and we'll continue to do better to try and make Johannesburg even a more safer city, because part of the problem that we're experiencing today is that Johannesburg, it's not rated as a safer city. So we need to do something aggressively to bring the levels of crime in Johannesburg so that our residents, even our visitors, tourists and so on, could feel much, much safer in Johannesburg. So it's another battle that we must engage in. And I suppose it requires all of us and society, law enforcement agencies and our communities to actively participate in reducing the levels of crime.
How do you plan to do that, though? I mean, what is going to drive that program of making Johannesburg safer?
Well, part of the interesting program we had relates to what we call JMPD 10+. And the intention of that program was to deploy, at least in every ward, officers and inspectors that will help us deal with bylaw enforcement and reduction of crime. We have inspectors, building inspectors, health inspectors, and so on and so on, deployed, focused in a particular ward. Currently, we've got much problems in the inner city of Johannesburg in terms of crime, meaning that if we had implemented that program successfully and it was not disrupted, we would have been talking a different story today, because we would have pushed back the levels of crime in the inner city and in other wards within Soweto and other townships. So we are focusing on it, and that's what we would do moving forward. And of course, the provincial government has also introduced a program to deal with crime called, I think, So that program, we think it will help us to go a long way in reducing the levels of crime in our city. We also have to advance on the smart city, so that we can put up cameras, CCTV cameras throughout the city to help us reduce the levels of crime, so that policing could be made easier and better, so that those that are involved in crime are apprehended. But over and above, we have to focus on the creation of jobs, which is an important aspect, to create an environment conducive for job creation to be created. And in that way, once majority of young people have access to jobs, it will also help us and contribute towards the reduction of crime.
Well, speaking of growing the economy and creating jobs, an issue recently was that of informal traders in the city who believed that the administration was harassing them, chasing them away from lucrative sports, and really discriminating against them. What is your view around what needs to happen to keep the city clean, to make sure that people adhere to the rules and regulations, but without inconveniencing them or chasing them away?
Well, there has to be a new model, a business model and a business case that we need to advance to help us deal with informal trading in the inner city in particular. So it's not just the simple issue of moving them from one spot to the other, because that's not a sustainable solution. You require a well thought of solution, and that is what we would be working on to help us ensure that we support informal trading, which is an important sector of the economy that's supposed to contribute to our economy. So unfortunately, at this stage, we don't think the informal traders policy do encompass certain issues that will help us to have a sustainable and a sustainable solution to even growing the economy of informal traders, because they have to move from informality to formality, informality to formality. And in that way, then you can say you're breaking ground, because there's growth in terms of that sector. So we'll have to inject even capital, and included in that, we'll have to look at proposals around establishment of a municipal bank, so that those informal traders and small business in Johannesburg can get access to funding, which has been difficult to access it through your mainstream banks. And how do we support them as a municipality. So those are some of the ideas that we're going to put in place and see how best we can implement them in a very short space of time. Imagine if we have a municipal bank that the city has invested some capital in, and we've also mobilized resources either from national government and other financial institutions so that they focus mainly on informal traders and small business with an intention to grow them from informality to formality. And so those are some of the ideas that we are putting in place, and in due time, we will be announcing those plans, ideas, and give more detail in terms of its implementation.
Okay.
The ideas are already there. What is now left is the action plan, which we are going to announce it publicly once we're ready.
I'm sure the people of Joburg are looking forward to that. Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, you heard Mpho Palatsa saying they are not taking this lying low. They are heading back to the courts, she suggested. Are you worried, or are you saying, bring it on?
No, well, they can go to the courts. The courts are there to interpret the law and to help us interpret the law as and when there's no clarity or there's confusion amongst ordinary citizens. So let them go to court. We are confident that the court will throw it outside. Okay,
let me thank you very much and congratulations once again.
Thank you for your...
As the newly elected mayor of the city of Johannesburg. After the break, action as a Gauteng chairperson and former Midval Mayor Bongani Baloyi on how the DA believes gave the ANC the city of Johannesburg on a platter. Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, we were talking a short while ago to the newly elected mayor of the city of Johannesburg. The question we're asking in this segment is, how did the ANC pull this one off? Well, my guest believes the DA's handling of coalition arrangements in the city gave the municipality to the ANC on a platter. Well, Mr. Bongani Baloyi, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and good evening.
So what happened? We thought you guys had this in the bag between you and the as Action SA and the DA and your allies.
We thought so as well, and then as things materialized, it was quite clear that firstly the DA does not believe in a few things. One, they don't appreciate that they don't have majority of council, that this is a coalition, and to make a coalition successful, there has to be a power sharing agreement, where in the case of the Johannesburg, it was the DA taking the mayor position, the chief whip of council, and the speaker position. And other parties who are playing a meaningful role were underrepresented there. So I think it's the DA's arrogance to think that we are all there to be of service to them, not appreciating that you need to maintain a healthy coalition where if members raise substantive issues, you need to apply your mind carefully and be much more inclusive and mature in the approach that you handle it. So that created the environment for the type of things we are seeing that are coming out now and manifesting. So I think that is entirely to the blame of the Democratic Alliance.
Arrogance only?
It's not just arrogance, but it's also not appreciating that they don't have majority and that coalitions must be inclusive. There must be a power sharing agreement as well. And how they continuously dismissed considered inputs from coalition members, and how they treated coalition members around key issues that they were raising. They did not see any coalition members. But this question can be better understood when you reflect on how they got elected. Remember, a day before the first councils after the 2021 elections, the DA collapsed conversations about coalitions. And Action SA and other parties forced them to govern. So they were governing under duress. They were quite happy not to get these metros. And when they were elected, it happened that they were very surprised. So the coalition agreements only were finalized after there was an election of the mayor, the speaker, and the chief whip. And there was an agreement there. So these people never wanted to govern at all from the first basis.
You know, I mean, in places like Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, a sense one got was that the local leaders actually had this. They understood perfectly what you've just said, but because the DAs, you know, I mean, these coalition arrangements and how to run them are handled centrally, you know, by the national leadership of the party, which often is naive to or don't have an appreciation of the realities on the ground. Now, one would imagine that you interact with your provincial counterpart, and that's Soli Msimang. Does he and his provincial leadership not have an appreciation of what you just said?
I don't know. I struggle to even put myself in their situation because, for an example, the provincial leader of the Democratic Alliance, on the eve of a very crucial negotiation about who will take the speaker position in the city of Johannesburg, whilst we're having this meeting, they publish an opinion piece where he describes and characterizes those who saying, let's amend the current agreement to create a provision that the IFP get the speaker position. He characterizes us and those who believe that to be rent seekers, minnows, and also parties driven by greed. Whilst we're on the verge of finalizing and making key compromises, and we're at that point accepting that we were not able to persuade the DA, and all of ourselves, including the IFP, were prepared to go and vote for a DA candidate on the eve. So somebody who appreciates those dynamics and the importance of maintaining a relationship which is respectful, which does not really create all of these unnecessary tensions among coalition members, would write such a thing and publish it at such a key time. So that further aggrieved parties like the IFP, parties like the PA, because we're raising substantive things. When the DA brought PA into the coalition agreement, an agreement was, that contract was amended. And in that contract, there's a provision which makes it permissible for us to amend the constitution and amend the contract. Now when we want to use that provision to amend the contract, they're saying we're doing something illegal. So with them, we must accept that they're in charge. All of us are just subservient to their will and to their purpose, and we must accept that Cape Town makes a final call. And a step further, on the day of council, when the mayor saw that the PA had made a view that if it's not an IFP candidate, they are going to not support this candidate. When the mayor saw that reality, the DA asked for a caucus meeting, and the mayor herself proposed that actually the DA is now ready to withdraw their candidate and let the IFP candidate proceed. And she had to get approval from Helen and John Steenhuisen, and they told her no. So the mayor was prepared to make a concession, someone who understood what is at stake. So,
but I mean, it shouldn't really have been an issue. I mean, they wrote an opinion piece because, I mean, if, as you said earlier, this was your lived reality.
Yeah.
The lived reality of parties that are supposed to be in a coalition with the DA. So an opinion piece that came out yesterday shouldn't have made a difference because it should have only served to confirm what you knew and what you were experiencing all along.
No, you can't tell an abuse victim that another abuse is just a continuation of what you know. Why are you complaining?
Well, what I'm getting at is then maybe you ought to have then acted much earlier. In other words, the negotiations you are getting into are not going to take you anywhere because this is how it's been happening. In other words, do you don't think that you put up with this for much longer than you should have? Okay.
Look, we dislike the treatment we're getting as Action SA, but we love the residents of Johannesburg more. So we're able to keep telling ourselves that we'll persuade them, we'll work within the coalition. When there's wrongdoing, we're going to fight decisively and hard because of the residents of City of Johannesburg. And that's why we're able to put up with this for this long. Including after they insult us, we went to council, honored the agreement and voted for a DA candidate. This is what they don't want to tell you. So we held up our own, we raised an intervention which would have resolved the crisis, which would have ensured that an IFP speaker is elected and PA remain within the coalition and the stability. But they opted for self-righteousness and wanting to be stagnant, saying the agreement is sacrosanct, you can't touch it, when they have already amended the agreement. So I think the DA here really needs to explain to residents, and they can't keep blaming Herman Mashaba. The mayor, former mayor, well now she's former mayor. Hey, these things happen quickly. Former Mayor Palatz, tonight she's not going to sleep. She'll be recalling everything as it happened. And I hope what she can do is be brave enough to go and tell her leadership that they actually delivered this city to the ANC, not anybody else. She knows the truth. And if she's someone who's honest, she will tell the truth.
But but she did try to accommodate, you know, your viewpoints and your interests, but you're saying that she was told where to get.
No, actually, man, the lady tried. You could tell she understands what's at stake. She's got a heart for the people, given her flaws, but one thing we know about her, she's not a thief. So we are content working with her. She tried. She was failed by Helen Zille and John Steenhuisen. And that is what the residents of Johannesburg must know. And they must also appreciate the level of abuse and arrogance we took to remain in this coalition. And we stuck by it. We stuck by it. Even when this candidate lost, we voted for a DA candidate as in terms of this agreement. And we raised sharp arguments. We were hoping to persuade them. And we accepted that we can't persuade them.
Were you aware of... let me put it this way. What if the DA was to say, look, we realize that we've been wrong in how we have managed these coalitions. We are prepared to look at this again. Would you?
Vuyo, a log that remains in the river for 15 years does not turn into a crocodile. So what you are asking, I don't think is possible. I don't think the DA is possible of that type of approach and possible of any sensible self-reflection. So that will remain a question that you'll just ask Nje, but I don't see it happening.
That's interesting, because if they acknowledge that coalitions are the future, but then continue to work like this, then it means that these coalitions are going to remain unstable. Well, for as long as they continue to also, attract the numbers that, they have, because it only means that they will have to. But let's take a look at what some people who are watching have to say about what we are discussing. Offense says, Action SA messed it up. All you had to do is to stick up to the coalition agreement. You failed to do so. Now you want to use our DA as a scapegoat.
That argument is nonsense and pedestrian, because Action SA voted for the DA candidate on the day which lost. Action SA raised an input to say, to stabilize this coalition further, let's exercise the clause in the contract which amends the constitution by the DA ceding that position to the IFP. The contract allows for its amendment, and we're exercising that clause. And we lost, we accepted, and Action SA still went to council and voted for the DA speaker. The party that did not vote for, which is a part of the coalition, is the PA. The PA did not vote, and they've articulated their reasons. So that is part of the DA propaganda, telling people that we've not held up their agreement. Meanwhile, we wanted to amend the agreement. We lost that argument. We accepted, went into council, voted for the DA candidate who lost.
How about amending, relooking the whole agreement, so that it then, instead of giving the DA the discretion, actually forcing it to do certain things? Wouldn't that be?
Well, firstly, we had a situation which triggered an amendment of the current contract, which is the vacancy of the speaker. And we felt that it's appropriate with the given circumstances to correct it. And the DA were arguing that, no, let's correct it later and let's get the entire contract relooked at. And we accepted that part. But it was important for us to be able to articulate and show to them that there's other views and they must consider. But this moment was a very significant moment. It was a moment where the DA had to grasp the gravitas of the moment and realize that this moment requires them to consider, one, that the decision to make here is whether DA retains power in the position or the DA stabilizes the coalition. And they chose power and position, and they lost both.
Is your experience in Tshwane any different?
It's difficult. We have a pending issue with the allegations that the coalition is investigating about the Tshwane mayor. And we have to raise this to South Africans and sensitize them that there's an illegal process that's happening in Tshwane, where a mayor was instructing officials on how to appoint people in a procurement process and claiming to be an unsolicited bid. So we're raising issues that are genuine. And all of this is actually saying to us, imagine if Action SA was not there. Who would have raised these issues and put a stop to all of these? So there's those natural tensions that exist, and a coalition will never be an environment without tension. There's a healthy tension which must sustain the coalition. But people must also be mature enough to appreciate when wrong is wrong and not defend wrong when it's in their party or in their interest, and protect their people at all costs. So Tshwane as well is another situation which we're still waiting for the outcome of the investigations on Mayor Randall Williams.
Mr. Baloyi, let me thank you for your time and providing us these insights. I think the public out there is wiser about what has happened, what led to the dramatic events of today. He is, of course, the leader of Action SA in the province of Gauteng. Up next, in conversation with the acting public protector, Kholeka Gcaleka, after releasing a number of reports, among them one which cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa of wrongdoing. The Office of the Public Protector has found that President Cyril Ramaphosa did not violate the Executive Code of Ethics after a leaked audio recording became public. In that recording, Ramaphosa says he is aware of how public funds were squandered for certain political campaigns within the ANC. Acting public protector Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka also says her office is receiving cooperation from everyone involved in the Phala investigation. Advocate Gcaleka was briefing the media on investigative reports that have been concluded, among them the 2020 trip by the then Defense Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. She gave an ANC delegation a lift on a military aircraft while on a working trip to Zimbabwe. Offense Stimo and Thank Mtsweni compiled this report.
A leaked audio recording where President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's aware of how public funds were squandered for certain political campaigns within the ANC prompted an uproar. Opposition parties deemed that Ramaphosa violated the Executive Code of Ethics by failing to inform law enforcement agencies. Despite this, acting public protector found no wrongdoing on his part.
Evidence obtained indicates that prior to the president making these utterances, it was widely reported, even in the Zondo Commission, which was public, on the misuse of public funds by the ruling party for party political gains.
Still on Ramaphosa, Advocate Kholeka says her office has beefed up the team investigating the Phala robbery. She says investigations are proceeding smoothly after complaints that she was dragging her feet on the matter.
The Phala investigation, which is the newest investigation on our EMEA role, is now approaching 4 months, and it is one of the several EMEA investigations that are active in the system, some of which exceed 40 months. We call upon the public to rest assured that we have covered a lot of ground and we are receiving cooperation from all stakeholders involved.
Meanwhile, the Department of Defense was found to have contravened procurement processes for its 2020 procurement of COVID-19 treatment worth 200 million from Cuba. This was procured without the necessary application to the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Then Defense Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula was also found to have contravened the Defense Act of 2002 and the Constitution for flying with an ANC delegation while on a working trip to Zimbabwe.
Ms. Mapisa-Nqakula neither had the authority nor the permission to ferry the ANC delegation in an SANDF aircraft that was approved to transport herself and her staff to and from Harare, Zimbabwe, for an official meeting with her counterpart.
An amount of 105,000 rand has since been paid by the ANC to the Department of Defense for the flight. Offense Stimo, SABC News, Pretoria.
the acting public protector, joins us on the line for some reflection. Public Protector, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Just on the issue of the president, you're saying in the clip that we played that I mean, these matters were widely reported, even in the Zondo Commission, that funds were being misused for party political gain. But wasn't the issue what the president himself knew? From his interactions, experience, and what he did with the information.
Good evening, Vuya, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you for having me on your show. Vuya, in respect of the investigations, besides the president's version, which he had sent to us, that he relied on information which was in the public domain, as well as what had been delivered by witnesses at the Zondo Commission. We also went into those records of the Zondo Commission, which, by the way, was publicly testified on. And indeed, before he made those utterances, there was evidence even by the state security agencies on those particular matters. Now, there was no evidence that says he had personal and direct knowledge outside of what had been widely and publicly reported. Indeed, if you look at our report, we do say that the president does have a duty. I mean, he's not an ordinary citizen, he's the president of the country. He does have a duty to report on such matters. But already, the Zondo Commission had been established. The president himself had cooperated and testified before the Zondo Commission, and is presiding over a country where law enforcement agencies are investigating state capture-related matters, including the misappropriation of funds by the ruling party. But moreover, the president also made the proclamation of the ID, the development of the independent directorate in the NPA, which is focused on investigating these kind of matters. So we therefore found that in his position, he had done enough to ensure that investigations in related matters are actually going on.
Before, allowing for investigations to go on, or because I'm looking at the, for instance, during the course of investigations, or when he was asked questions to which he supplied replies, was it put to him, for example, that every Monday he sits in a meeting of 6 people who are the top officials of the ANC, and in that context would come across information that the rest of us, or even the rest of the people who belong to his political party, are not privy to, and whether in that context or during those meetings he came across information that perhaps he should have acted on, or at the very least shared with, in particular, state law enforcement agencies.
What's critical for us to understand there is that by the time the president made these utterances, and which were the allegations in terms of EMIA, the information was already public. So there was no information in our possession, and there was neither an allegation that the president knew prior to that. And neither even in the clip does it say that he had the information prior to the information becoming public.
Now, the minister, or former Minister of Defense and current Speaker of the National Assembly, wasn't as lucky. She didn't get away with it. You found that she contravened the Defense Act for flying an ANC delegation on a military aircraft while she was on a working trip to Zimbabwe. The ANC has apparently paid an amount of 105,000 rand to the Department of Defense. But what happens, or what should happen to the minister given her conduct?
Firstly, Vuya, it's not luck. It's assessment of evidence, application of the law before us that makes us to arrive at the decision that we finally arrive at. In this instance, we did not recommend any direct remedial action against the minister. If you recall, the president had admonished her already, and she had to pay 3 months' salary. And thereafter, even the ANC, after an amount was determined by the defense department, also paid the amount. Therefore, we could not make remedial action when there's already been a remedy on the same facts and matter, because it would amount to double jeopardy. What we have, however, made as a remedial action is that the president needs to issue an instruction to ensure that the legal prescripts applicable which forbid the kind of act which was committed to happen again. So there needs to be a reinforcement of the applicable legal prescripts.
Quickly, PP, on the matter of Public Enterprise Minister Pravin Gordhan, you found that contrary to what EFF Deputy President, the EFF Deputy President thinks, he did not appoint an official wrongly in his office.
Indeed, even in that matter, we found that the allegations were not substantiated. Again, we assessed the information before us. We looked into the legal prescripts which manage the particular action, and we found that the public service regulations do provide for a deviation by the minister in instances where he wants to appoint somebody who does not qualify in certain requirements for the position, but there are certain requirements that need to be satisfied, and that he needed to get the approval of the Minister of Public Service and Administration, which in this instance were the steps that the Minister of Public Enterprises took, and he also had provided a motivation, and one of them was that Ms. Murato had the experience, she had acted in the position before, despite her not holding the required qualifications, and thus, in line with the public service regulations, the approval was granted.
Advocate Gcaleka, let me thank you for your time. That's where we're going to leave it for now. Really appreciate you making yourself available. Well, with the monkey off his back, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, announced the board of Eskom. He also outlined some of the key issues that the board should focus on. We leave you with a soundbite from what he had to say earlier.
The mandate of the board is as per the shareholder compact, but clearly what we will do now is to review what is in the existing compact and assess what is required right now by the country of both the board and the 40,000 people that work within Eskom, and make any modifications that are necessary. But the most urgent of which clearly is that the country wants some surety that load shedding will be minimized or eliminated. Secondly, that the collapse of or dysfunctionality in many of our power station units is something that is of the past. Thirdly, that together with the law enforcement agencies, we are able to catch literally those people who are guilty of either fraud and malfeasance on the one hand, which extracts, I think, billions of rands from Eskom's funding, and others who have their own particular interests, largely commercial, but it might be other interests as well, and who are intent upon disrupting the functioning of Eskom, pretty much like is happening in some parts of the Transnet rail infrastructure, where cable theft and other forms of damage to signaling systems and the disappearance of rail itself is causing harm to the logistics network in the country.